Welcome, everybody, to Redeemer's online campus and Father Wood Zoomcasts. And I welcome with me today the Venerable Canon Michael Durning of the Diocese of Southwest Florida, who had just coming off a recent stint as Canon to the Ordinary of the Diocese of Oklahoma, and has been named Canon to the Ordinary Emeritus in Southwest Florida, and is one of our wonderful and amazing adjunct retired clergy here at Church of the Redeemer, which is our retired clergy who help out with daily masses and teaching classes here and there, are really one of the treasures we have at Church of the Redeemer, and we've added to our treasure chest with Canon Durning. Welcome, Canon Durning.
Thank you. Good to be here, Father Chris.
So I've got a few questions for you that will hopefully inform and educate our viewership. And the first one is, we've got lots of weird words we use in the church, things like narthex, and for some reason, the place in the church that's called the choir is spelled with a Q, and things like that. And so the title of canon, if you could give us a little bit of the history of what that title is and what it means, that'd be great.
Yeah, it is one of those words. Actually, and its origins are pretty common. If you were to translate the word canon into Greek, it would come out canon. It's literally the Greek word. And what it means is kind of like a standard or a yardstick. So yeah, attorneys will often talk about the canons of state law. Of course, we have canon law within the church. And it goes back to that time when a standard list of clergy was required in order to guarantee that training, education, and accountability was available amongst the clergy in a particular diocese. And so the canonical list, or the lawful legal list of clergy, came to be the list of the official clergy of the diocese. That then evolved into a list of cathedral clergy. The official clergy of a cathedral were the canons of the cathedral. And then once diocesan work, especially in the United States, transcended from being just the church in the state of Pennsylvania to the Diocese of Pennsylvania, then diocesan bishops started appointing canon priests to serve in certain capacities, calling them canons. So it's evolved from, it just means it's a unit of measurement. So just like a yardstick isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing, it just has a standard. So in the same way, a canon isn't any more of a priest than a priest is. I'm just a priest. Mm-hmm. But having now what is an honorary title of canon is simply a recognition of what was for me 25 years of diocesan life. And I'm glad God had asked me to dedicate myself in this way. So a little bit of a history on the term canon.
That's wonderful. And your title, Canon to the Ordinary.
Right.
What does that mean?
Right. Well, the ordinary is one of those words. It's a little bit like regular. Ordinary means not plain. It's the ordinary is the person who does the ordaining. It's the person who has ordinary authority, and that person is the bishop. So it's canon to the ordinary. I am directly accountable to the bishop. In Canadian canon law, they actually refer to the diocesan bishop as the bishop ordinary. But I do get a lot of canon of the ordinary on the presumption that the bishop deals with the extraordinary people. And he's among the first to kind of quell that. No, I'm the bishop for everybody. This person happens to be my canon. So
that's great. And so, how many bishops did you work under?
Well, I was. Let me see. I was with Bishop Rogers Harris. I was chairman of the Diocesan Finance Committee, but I was also rector of St. Mark's Church down in Marco Island at that time. But we worked very closely together when the standard within this diocese went from an assessment to an apportionment. So Some of our larger parishes in the diocese at the time were sending as much as 25% of their money to the diocese. Migrating that from that system to one where everyone gave the diocese 10% happened when I was chair of the finance committee. That was Bishop Harris. Bishop John Lipscomb actually asked me to be canon of the ordinary in the late 1990s. And then when the transition happened in 2007, when Bishop Dabney Smith came on board, he simply asked me to stay. And I was happy to do that. So,
on behalf of all the parishes in the diocese, thank you for getting that assessment fixed for us. Actually, there's a great story to that. Redeemer, under the leadership of Father Fred, when that happened, they continued to give away the money that they were normally giving away, and they created a mission and outreach committee that writes grants for charities that are in need. And so it's really cool that we were able to take what we were already sending to the diocese and just spread it out a little bit more among more charities and things that we chose. It was I think it was a great move for our diocese, and finding out that you were part of that's a really neat story.
Yeah, it was a lot of work, but Glenn Schatzberg was the treasurer of the diocese at the time. He had faith and confidence that this could be done. Mm. And he just needed people around him who could share that faith and confidence. And so it took about 2 years to come about, but I am glad that it did, because it did an awful lot to stimulate local growth within the parishes of the diocese.
I know from personal experience, one of the jobs of the Canon of the Ordinary is helping out with all of us seminarians as we're going through the process and that sort of thing. Tell me a little bit about that part of the job.
That was actually my favorite job as canon to the ordinary. I would go to seminaries to visit students and make sure they were doing well. We'd take them out to dinner because sometimes they had their lives were, shall I say, meager. There aren't too many really wealthy seminarians, so they enjoyed going out for dinner, having some time together, a time for pastoral care, and of course, monitoring the diocesan ordination process, and making sure that it's fair to everybody, and that the standards or the canons are being met. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that was my favorite job.
I could speak from personal experience that you were a real blessing on my family and I as we went through seminary, went through the discernment process. It was everything that needed to be done was always very clear, and you were always a good spiritual counselor and guide for us, and so I really appreciate it. As was Bishop Smith and Father Fred. I really had a great group of people to rely on when I went through the process in 2013.
Bishop Smith really cherishes that role. I mean, he really, in that role, sees himself as being a priest to the priests and a priest to the seminarians, and he really relishes it. I think he's done a remarkable job of pastoral care for people who are in formation.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, just for us, so I know to have a one-on-one conversation with Bishop Smith is always it's almost always pastoral in nature because of who he is, and I really do love our bishop very much, and I'm very glad that you were part of my discernment process also. It's really been a great experience here in Southwest Florida for me.
Good thing, yeah.
So I want to go back in time a little bit. You're from Philadelphia, correct?
I am.
So what was it, and at what point did young Michael Durning decide that he thought he might be called to the priesthood?
As it is with so many people, there's a number of strands that come together at the same time. They form a pattern, and then you notice it, and you do the next thing. So for me, it was, I was in communications. I was the art director for Farm Journal Books, and we designed cookbooks and sewing books for Doubleday Publishing in New York City.
Doubleday. I know that name well because they used to own the Mets.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Oh, yeah, 245 Park Avenue, New York City. Yeah, and so we did a lot of work with Doubleday. And in my spiritual life at that time, I was involved. very regular with church and loving it, loving the Episcopal Church, to which I converted. I was originally a Roman Catholic many years ago. And it came to my mind that as many of the products that I produced in design, I had never met one person who ever read a book that I had made.
Mm.
There's no connection. I mean, you finish the product and you hope it sells well, you know. And so I really began to crave that sense of personal contact with other people. And one day, as I was talking to my priest, he just kind of looked at me and said, Michael, have you ever thought of testing a vocation to ordained ministry? And we were having lunch at the time, and I kind of gagged a little bit. But he challenged me to that, and it evolved into a call. The Diocese of Pennsylvania at that time had 100 people in the ordination process, so it was a bit crowded. So I was ordained in 1988, June of 1988, ordained to the diaconate. 1 year later in Florida at St. John's Church in Naples, I was ordained to the priesthood. So for me, being a priest is living into God's invitation to shepherd. You know, the bishop's crozier is, among other things, a tool of contact. Shepherd contacts, sometimes to save them, sometimes to direct them. And so it means contacting people for me. And of course, for those of you, people such as yourself, who are full-time now into parish ministry, this pandemic must be just awful, because everything that we do presumes that we can be in touch with people or hold on to their hand or pat them on the back or whatever. That's denied to us. All the things that we do so well, singing loud in a church, you know,
Yeah.
Congregating together. Those are all things that we have to be so very careful about. So as an older priest, Father Chris, I can say I've never had anything like this happen. And I admire those of you younger clergy who are out there doing this hard work. I really do admire it.
Yeah, it's kind of like being Peyton Manning on a line of scrimmage and really not realizing the play you called is wrong, and you're yelling Omaha, Omaha over and moving in direction. And I'll tell you, innovation and innovate is the key word that we're using at Redeemer. And we just have to, you know, when this all happened and when we closed down, we said, okay, how are we going to make it so everything could be as normal as possible? And we've just pushed through and done as much as we can. And it turns out that closing a church is more work than keeping it open.
I can imagine. When you think of all the prayer books in the pews and sanitizing the church and and all that, it's just got to be. It's just so enormously stressful. And not just on the clergy, but everybody.
What it is, and not being able to see people and not being able to, you know, we have a Redeemer. We visit the hospital every day. If there's someone there, we go. And sometimes we go when there's not there, and we check the list just to make sure, because they miss it sometimes. And us not being allowed in the hospital, Father Charleston said this the other day, you know, we go into the hospital to minister to people, and often we come out having been ministered to by the people that are in the hospitals. And it's a real loss to not be able to go see those folks that are sick anymore. And we're calling them, we're having conversations, we're doing those sorts of things, but it's rough. It's rough. So you graduated seminary and your first call was to Southwest Florida.
Yes. Well, actually, I did a year after graduation in Philadelphia, and suburban Philadelphia, in Malvern, Pennsylvania. And that was one where by the time I got to the end of that year, the priest was leaving, the director was leaving. And so I was advised it wouldn't be a bad time to start looking for the next thing to do. And I had met the rector of St. John's in Naples up at the campus at General Seminary in New York City. And so I just gave him a call, and it turned out that he was looking for a curate. I was there for 3.5 years. And as you very well know, Father Chris, if you want to make God laugh, tell God what your plans are. Our plan was to go back to Philadelphia after 3 years of being in Southwest Florida. We have never gone back. I mean, we've gone back to see family and such, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't know how to act, I don't think, in that diocese anymore. It's so different,
Yeah, and you went from there to St. Mark's, right?
Well, I went from St. John's in Naples to St. Mark's Church, Marco Island.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a wonderful experience. For me, it was that change of being the assistant. I was the associate rector by then, to actually being in charge of a church, being the rector. And for me, it was like all of those skills and gifts that God had given me in my leadership were all coming together at the same time and being used all at once. And so had a blast. It was a great stay. Enjoyed it a lot. And I was there for 6 years. And that's when I got the call from Bishop Lipscomb to join the staff here in the diocese.
Yeah. So you mentioned you really enjoyed working with seminarians. Is there anything over the 25 years that you were the canon of the ordinary, is there anything there that was or any couple of things there that were huge highlights that you just recall as being golden moments for you as canon of the ordinary?
Yeah. One of the repeatedly one of my very favorite things is remember that the canon of the ordinary also works with congregations that are in a search process, that are in transition. And I would love to walk through that whole process with the congregation and then go to the celebration of new ministry for the new rector. And whenever I did that, I did it quietly. I always tried to sit in the last pew and be the first one to leave. Mm. Simply so that they could have all of that attention. But working with the congregation through the transition and then celebrating that. Another favorite moment is, for me, was at the ordination of a priest or a deacon. As canon to the ordinary, it was my job to make sure nobody lost the oath of conformity, which is required by Article 8 of the Constitution of the Episcopal Church, that you sign a document that says that you believe the Holy Scriptures to be the Word of God, and promising to conform to the doctrine, discipline, and worship of the Episcopal. That's got to be signed before you can go begin the ordination. And holding that book and handing the pen over to the ordinand, who's usually...
I remember.
We use fountain pens too, so I can make a mess.
I think when I did that, I put the pen down the wrong way. I had to turn it around to you.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff like that happens because you're nervous. Everybody, because when you're doing that, you're holding that book and you're asking the ordinand to sign it. You've been with that person sometimes for years, as they've gone through their studies and their discernment, or if there's a setback or whatever. Walk with them as they've overcome the obstacles. And then, so to me, it was just a lovely moment. I always felt so grateful to be with the ordinands at that time. So the canon of the ordinary has two major functions, I think. One is to allow the bishop to maintain an apostolic ministry. The bishops are on the road a lot. They've got their visitation schedules to churches on Sundays. They've got House of Bishops meetings and all kinds of other things. the canon of the ordinary has got to be the one who kind of keeps the drumbeat going, even when the bishop's not in the office.
Yeah.
And that's a major responsibility for any canon to the ordinary. But that's not necessarily the most fun part of the job. To me, the fun part of the job is kind of standing in that threshold with this person who's either becoming the rector of the church or is about to become a deacon or a priest, and to be with them as they make that transition. That's the most fun part, I think, of doing what I've done all those years.
All right, I'm going to add a question that I wasn't planning on adding in. What advice would you give to a young priest or someone in seminary study in their studies, in the discernment process, or someone who feels a call to enter into the discernment process? What advice would you give them about life as an Episcopal priest?
Well, okay. I think where I would begin, Chris, would be to say that little things mean a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The daily office means a lot. Reading the Bible every day means a lot. Making sure you're meeting with your spiritual director. For seminarians, knowing when the Ember Day letters are and using that opportunity to write to your bishop and see if you can invite his or her pastoral advice. And a lot of times, I think people who are in formation or young priests are just so tuned into other things that it's easy to take your eyes off the little stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's the little stuff that's really making the difference.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah. So there's a saying, don't sweat the small stuff, sweat the small stuff.
Yeah. Amen. All right, last question for you. What's your favorite thing about being a priest?
About being a priest in general? Oh, one of the great things about being a priest, I think, is when you've got the kid in the youth group who seems to be mixed up, and you can maybe provide or be a part of that clarity of life that is such a part of parish life. Parish life brings, I think, great consistency and clarity. And so by being involved in the parish, you've got that. And then, 10 years later, you're standing at the altar because you're presiding over their wedding.
Yeah.
Or in my case, the kid who was in the youth group is making out our will because they're an attorney, and then all of a sudden this kid that you remember is an actual member of the Bar Association, or is a doctor, or has got their own business. Here at the house, we needed some electrical work done, so we called Mr. Sparky.
Mm-hmm.
And so the guy from Mr. Sparky shows up, and he looks at me and says, "You look familiar." And we started putting the pieces together, and he was in my youth group 30 years ago, maybe.
Wow.
And to me, the amazing thing was, not only did he not forget that, it was a very memorable part of his life. And so to have that holy invitation as a priest to enter into people's lives is probably the favorite thing, and it's also the most sacred thing about being a priest, is helping people to discover how God is working in their lives, if it's a great thing or a small thing.
That's amazing. You remind me of the two girls who I met when I was still living in New York who were campers at St. Michael's Conference, where I was a counselor, and I got to know them when we were there, and developed a relationship with them as friends. And one of them is now my vet, and I married another one in January.
Right, yeah.
And they were 14 at the time, and both of them, here at Redeemer, it's really incredible. You're right. It's seeing the growth of young people, especially in the church, and thank you for that. That's great. Great perspective. Well, Canon Durning, I've had a blast talking to you today, and I hope everybody on Facebook land has enjoyed it too. And I hope you have a great day, and thank you. Is there anything you want to add on your way out?
No, just the fact that we're looking forward to coming alongside at Redeemer, being part of the family, and just having that as a part of this part of our ministry. So thank you.
We're excited too. Everybody get ready to see a little bit more, or maybe a lot more of Canon Durning. Depends on how much work he wants to do.
All right, you take care.
God bless. Bye-bye.